start. Okay. Hi, everybody. Again, thank you guys so much for coming to our Cars workshop. This is the second workshop of our Spring 2025 series, and you guys are in for a really great treat today. Not only do you get to practice some car strategies, but you get to do it with a Blueprint instructor, which is really great. Just one thing before I hand it over to Catherine. As you heard the Zoom voice say, we will be recording, and so you will have access to the recording after today's workshop for you guys to really review and use as a part of your MCAT prep. If you guys have any questions or technical difficulties, please go ahead and reach out to me or Kayla. So just change your chat to the pre-health or pre-law, and you can help you figure out any difficulties that do arise. And so we had everybody test the chat, and it looks like it's working fine. So please remember to be engaging and answer any questions that Catherine throws out to you guys, and make the most of your time with her today. But without further ado, I'll hand it over to Catherine to get us started for today. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you guys so much for having me. I'm calling in from Chicago, so a little bit of ways away from you guys. It's 8 o'clock my time here. But so happy to be with you all today. Very brief introduction. You guys see my face, but now you can see another picture of my face. So my name's Catherine. I am originally from Virginia. I went to Vanderbilt for undergrad. I majored in chemistry. I scored a 518 on my MCAT. I took my MCAT back in January of 2021. So peak COVID, honestly, a pretty good time to study for the test. I'm currently a second year, almost third year student at Northwestern Feinberg School of Medicine, up in Chicago, like I just said. Teaching style, I love making connections across topics. So when I was studying for the MCAT, something that really frustrated me was I felt like um, I would be learning these things and I was like, what does this have to do with medicine? And I'm not gonna lie, there are definitely topics that you just have to grin and bear it. I'm not a physics person, but I just have to grin and bear it. But a lot of things you can really make some neat connections. And then my fun fact is I'm an ordained minister and I actually married my sister this summer. So again, today the chat is going to be really helpful for me so I can know like you guys are engaged, participating. If you guys are confused, please tell me you're confused. Um, and then also we're going to do some questions and that's going to be the way we are going to answer. We don't have polls set up today. So we are going to do a waterfall style poll. I'll explain that as we get farther along. But please make sure you have your chat setting changed to everyone. This way, like if you have a question, chances are someone else has this question. Um, and then we also have the Q&A feature. And that's if you want to ask something more specific, or maybe it's not directly related to what we're talking about. We're going to save a good bit of time at the end for questions, and that can be related to cars, can be related to MCAT, can be related to med school. Here to answer all of those, and I'm in the thick of it, so I feel like I'm pretty well equipped to answer them. And so now that your chat, hopefully we saw that it's active with a hi, but I'd love to hear what everyone's go-to study snack is because I feel like this is a good just, get to know you question. And I know that when I was studying for the test, I absolutely needed study snacks to get me through the day. So would love to hear your guys' favorites. And honestly, still need study snacks because unfortunately the studying does not stop. Ooh, salt and vinegar chips. Those are great, except sometimes I eat too many and it kind of burns my mouth. Grapes are a great one. Chocolate chip cookies, popcorn, peanut butter cookies. Yeah, I'm definitely more on the sweets train. I'm really addicted to the Nerds gummy clusters right now. Yeah, I have a quite the addiction to those. Taro chips, great one. Espresso beans. Yeah, I also probably have a little bit of a caffeine addiction, which I'm sure someone else in the chat can relate. Um, but love it. Again, this is not meant to be extremely formal. I want to make sure you guys get a lot out of this webinar, but I don't want you guys to feel like you can't ask questions, especially if you're confused at any point. So always feel free to drop stuff in the chat. A little bit of an agenda for today. So we already welcome to the workshop. So today again is all about cars. If you had to rate on like 0 is like cars is the worst thing I've ever done to 10, like I love cars more than anything in the world, put in the chat where would you guys rank cars? So I feel like people tend to have pretty polarizing opinions on this. I'd love to see where we are at here. Scale of 1 to 10. Hate it. It's like a 0. Love it. It's like a 10. Okay, we have one vote for -10, a 5, a 5. Not sure yet. Totally okay. Yeah, I feel like it can definitely be a polarizing topic. I will say this is definitely one of the sections that I think frustrated me more because it's not definitely related to science. Of course, being able to interpret scientific reading or scientific literature is important for the MCAT, but I was definitely a little bit frustrated by the car section. The one thing I love about teaching the car section is that there is so much strategy baked into it. And that you can really start from the ground and really work your way up. So today we're going to talk first about some cars core reading strategies. These are going to be important regardless of the type of passage. So for those of you who have not really started dedicated studying for your MCAT yet, there are a lot of different types of passages you can run into. So it could be something like philosophy, something like history, economics. You can really kind of run across the board on the type of passage that you do. Some people have ones they love. I was personally a hater of philosophy passages. Luckily, there will not be a philosophy passage today, but regardless of the type of passage, there are some core strategies we can use. We will next talk about approaching cars questions. There is a standardized approach that I use and that we teach in all of our blueprint classes. So you guys are kind of getting some free insight into kind of how to approach cars questions. And then we are going to do a cars practice passage with we're going to walk through highlighting it together, and then we will also go through a couple questions. And then I will spend a little bit of time at the end just talking about Blueprint. I love my job, and I think Blueprint does a really great job. And so just want to talk to you guys a little bit about that. And this is a webinar, so part of my job. And then lastly, we'll finish up with the Q&A. And again, like I said earlier, I really want that to be for you guys. Answer any questions you might have. Okay, yeah. So again, welcome to the workshop. Okay, so again, starting off with those core reading strategies, there are a lot of tools you can have during the MCAT. So can you guys drop in the chat? Do any of you know the like tools on the software that you can use for the MCAT? Any tools you have for car science that are available to you? Yeah, seeing one vote for highlight, absolutely. And so we have our highlighter. You actually now have two colors of highlighter. That's a change in the past year from the AAMC. So, we're not going to talk too much about using two different colors of highlighting tonight, but just something to consider. You also have a pen and paper. It's not exactly pen and paper, it's a wet erase board, but it's basically like a whiteboard that doesn't erase, and you get several sheets of like whiteboard paper that you get to use. And so to first talk about that, how much do you guys think you want to use a wet board and eraser for the car section? Is that going to be something you use a lot? Do we think we would use a pen and whiteboard? And yes, love what I'm seeing here. No wrong answers. Don't be afraid to put things in the chat. Um, I promise the more engaged you are with the chat, it always keeps me focused. I don't know about you guys. I tend to try to be a little bit too much of a multitasker. So being engaged in the chat is a great way to make sure you're staying a little bit focused. Again, nothing too serious, too intense tonight. But do we think we should use a whiteboard for cars? Yeah, seeing no, probably not. So there are very rare instances where you're going to need it. Maybe you have a ton of arguments to keep track of, or you just want to jot down a couple notes, but really it is not going to be your main strategy for our cars. Now we talked a little bit about the highlighter already, and this to me is like the gold. And now when I was studying for the MCAT, I was a terrible highlighter. I would color my page yellow or I wouldn't use it at all. So what we want to talk a lot about is being a little bit conservative with our highlighting. For some of my tutoring students, I will give them like a highlighter allowance. Like you can only highlight 5 words per paragraph just because people have the tendency to highlight too much. So we really want to capture um, purpose and key ideas after reading each paragraph. So this idea of highlighting actually after we read is something called retroactive highlighting. It's a concept that I actually learned when I started teaching for Blueprint, and it can be extremely helpful because when you're reading through a passage, sometimes it's really easy to think that everything is important, but once you get to the end, maybe you realize, oh, that wasn't really related to the main idea, or oh, like that was just a small little detail that I didn't exactly need to know. So we want to avoid highlighting entire sentences. Um, Again, this is just trying to make sure we are a little bit conservative, a little bit judicious with our highlighting. It's important to use it so that at the end of reading your passage, you are creating kind of a passage map. You look back at your passage as you start to answer the questions and you can pick out, okay, what are the most important things that I need to know? And then finally, this is like extremely corny, but your eyeballs are also going to be an important skill. Cars is very long. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the format of it, it is going to be 9 passages on the section, and it's 90 minutes to take that section. So it roughly comes out to 10 minutes per passage. Some passages will be a little easier, you might go faster, some might be a little harder, you might go slower. Um, but your eyeballs are going to be crucial. And what we mean by this is you really need to focus on the passage. Sometimes with cars, maybe it's a topic you know a lot about, and it can be extremely easy to bring in outside information because, to be honest, that's what you're doing for the rest of the test. And so that is very, very normal. And we would need to remember what I always tell my students is the passage is king. So always, always, always make sure we are focused in on the passage. Trying to avoid skimming and skipping questions. If you end up enrolling in one of our Blueprint Live online classes, we do actually dedicate part of the lesson to talking about what happens if I need to skim. And to be honest, you can get some great gold out of skimming. So I'm not gonna say never skim. I think that's like maybe a little bit dramatic, but um we are gonna try to avoid skimming where we can. So when we're thinking about paying attention, how many of you guys like whether it's in a science class or you've been taking some practice MCAT passages, we can drop a 6 in the chat for a yes, a 9 in the chat for no. Kind of looks like thumbs up, thumbs down. Put a 6 in the chat if you've ever just completely zoned out or like suddenly you find yourself on your phone, scrolling on Instagram, scrolling on TikTok. Have you ever done that? Yeah, seeing the sixes in the chat. Yeah, me too. Like, honestly, an hour before this, I was watching a lecture and I looked down and I'm like, I'm on Instagram again. And maybe I should just delete Instagram from my phone. But basically, what I'm saying is we've all been there. Now, obviously, when it's test day, your phone is locked in a cabinet. You don't have access to your phone, but it can still be very, very challenging to pay attention. So, there are a lot of ways that we can talk about paying attention. And so, there are a lot of strategies. You obviously want to focus on building your weaknesses, building endurance over time. So for those of you who are looking at a test date fairly soon on the horizon, I don't know where all of you are on your MCAT journey, but for those of you who are getting closer to test day, I really recommend taking CARS passages a couple at a time. There's a concept in physics called just noticeable difference, and it's right. If the difference is really small, you're not going to notice it, or like you can think about it like if you're on a treadmill and you bump the speed to 3 to 3.1, you're not going to notice it. But if you bump from 3.0 to 4.0, you're definitely going to notice it. So if you slowly build up your stamina over time, that's really going to help. And so for even those of you who don't have your MCAT scheduled yet, trying to work for longer blocks of time, whether that be for any class you're in, maybe you are a freshman in Gen Chem. Still work on trying to build your stamina, build your endurance. This is a skill that will serve you in your college classes. It will serve you for the MCAT, and it will definitely serve you for med school. Another strategy can be focusing on rephrasing the passage in your own words. A lot of times they like to use big words and fluffy languages in cars passages to try to confuse you. But a lot of times they will give you good context clues so that even if there are some words that you might be a little bit more unfamiliar with, you can use context clues to figure them out. So trying to rephrase things in your own words. This next strategy is one that I think is fantastic. It's called taking breaks, strategically placed breaks within the section. I've always called them micro breaks, so it sounds like a little bit corny. But sometimes you can find that when you're sitting in like this long car section, you're like, oh my God, I'm seeing double, like my eyes are crossed. I'm so exhausted. And so when I was taking the test, if I would have a tough passage or maybe like every two or three passage, I would honestly just like close my eyes and take a couple deep breaths, 10, 15 seconds. Doesn't sound like it makes much of a difference, but a big thing that you want to do is to be able to one, keep your stamina up, and two, keep your stress levels down. I'm sure all of you at this point, you're all in college. You've probably all taken a test that freaked you out a little bit. And everyone knows the feeling where you like look at a question, you don't really know it. You look at the next question, you're like, oh, I don't know that too. And suddenly your heart's beating a little bit faster and you're getting a little bit more nervous, and that makes it harder to focus. And that happens to a lot of people when they're taking important or long or stressful tests. So, strategically placed breaks is going to be absolutely essential. So I know that was a lot of me talking. Before we go on to specifically talking about approaching cars questions, do you guys have any questions about reading strategies? Any questions about just kind of cars in general? And I'll give you guys a second to type. Okay, I don't think we have any questions for now. So feel free to drop them in at any point. Feel free to ask me questions while I'm talking. You are not bothering me at all. I am here to answer questions. So speaking of questions, we're now going to talk a little bit how we approach cars questions. So getting started. So again, I said this earlier, but cars passages are always going to rely, cars questions are going to rely on passage information. So we are never bringing in our outside knowledge. Sounds really is easy in theory, but in practice it can be very challenging, especially on some more opinion style questions, which we will get them today. So before we go through the rest of these bullet points, I'm going to introduce you to probably like the cornerstone strategy we teach at Blueprint. And honestly, I think it's extremely effective. And it's going to be called the SIP strategy. So I'm going to write it out on the screen here. So SIP, and this is how you're going to approach every single question on the MCAT. It doesn't matter if it's in cars question, a science question, anything. So the S is going to stand for simplify. So a lot of questions on the MCAT have very long or convoluted question stems. They will use double negatives. They will use a lot of fancy language. They will lay out this long scenario. You really want to make sure you are getting to the core ask of each question. If you don't know what a question's asking, you are never going to be able to get it right. And so by simplifying it down, not only does this help you approach the question, but then once you pick an answer, it's going to help you go back to that question sim very easily and make sure that you identified exactly what you need to know. We're going to practice all of this when we do our cars passage today. So the second step is going to be identify. So identify can mean a couple different things, but it's mostly going to mean where can I find this information? Now for our cars, again, this is always going to be the passage, so we want to get particularly granular. And I'm going to ask you guys today as we go through our cars questions, what paragraph did I find this in? Where did I get this information? Because again, you're not expected to memorize these passages. You want to be able to go back and find that information and pull directly from the text. And then finally, a strategy that I think is a little bit unusual for some students is actually to predict. And this means to predict our answer choice before you even look at like A, B, C, or D. And I will actually be covering up A, B, C, D today. So you guys are forced to predict. This isn't always possible. Like sometimes you have a question that is just 100% answered by process of elimination. But if you can get yourself in the habit of doing this, it can help us avoid those times where maybe we saw a word that was sounds a little bit similar and we get trapped. So by predicting, that can help anchor us in what we're looking for. Um, so going through these strategies, a lot of them are going to relate to this SIP strategy. Um, so rephrasing each question to make what it's asking clear. This is basically just our S, our simplify step. So we want to take extra care with question stems that contain things like negatives. So not, except, besides, things like that. Luckily, they will a lot of times put them in all caps. Not always. This is something I always highlight, and we will go through that today. Double negatives, again, I think it's cruel and unusual punishment. I don't think they should be allowed to do it, but I don't write the test. Opposite terms. So this is a strategy they will use in the question stem, and they will also use this in your answer choices. So paying close attention to opposites. When we can't effectively predict, sometimes our answer choices are going to be actually much easier than the question stem itself. So again, trying to not get too bogged down by one thing you don't understand, because you have the opportunity to figure it out elsewhere. And then finally, working through questions can sometimes help you better understand the passage. Drop a 6 in the chat. Doesn't have to be just for the MCAT. Have you ever like read something? I honestly feel like it's always just like reading in a bio or biochem textbook, or chemistry too, even though it was a chem major. You read something and it was like you were reading, you like read the words on the page and it went one ear out the other. Like totally didn't retain any of the information. Has that happened to you guys? 6 in the chat if it has. Yeah. Seeing a lot of sixes happens to me honestly all the time. I will watch a video of something and it feels like gibberish. So this can happen on the MCAT. There is probably going to be a passage that you just, again, really don't vibe with. And so making sure we use those questions to try to guide us on what was important. And again, so now working through the question, again, kind of going back to our SIP strategy, we want to try to predict the answer choice after reading each question, again, anchoring us in the beliefs that we think are core to the passage, so we don't get tripped up by a lot of the traps that the AAMC will lay for us. Um, Decide whether you need to return to the passage. Some simpler main idea questions, if you really understood the passage, you might not even need to go back. So, don't always need to go back, if you feel like you really understand it. So again, that identify step, determine what information a question requires. And then you can use your passage highlighting to guide you. So going back to what I said a couple slides ago, if you have effective highlighting, it's going to make your question answering much more efficient. Read an answer choice fully before choosing it. Only one word needs to be wrong for a question or for an answer choice to be wrong. And then don't make leaps of logic and go beyond the scope of answering a question. One more function that we have is going to be the flag function. So similar to how you can do this, I think you can do this on the SAT, ACT. A lot of just like modern online testing softwares will have this. But we try to be, again, similar with highlighting, be kind of conservative with your flag use. So only use it if you think that more time would help you answer the question. If you have absolutely no idea what's going on and you know no matter how long you sit there, it's not going to get better, you don't need to come back to it. I think for cars, a lot more complicated questions can benefit from a flag, but sometimes in the sciences, if it requires outside information and you really have no idea what's going on, it's okay. The MCAT has a lot of questions. You don't need to get every single one right to score well. So only use it if you think that more time would help you. Okay, so that was a lot of me talking. I hope you guys are still there. We're gonna get to practice in the next slide, but before we move to practice, any questions? Okay, so we are going to move to our cars passage. And we are gonna go, we have the first three paragraphs on the first slide and the last two paragraphs on the second slide. So I'm going to give you guys 90 seconds to read these first three paragraphs, and then we're going to walk through the highlighting. And now, as you read through this, I want you to think about a couple things. I want you to think about what is the main idea you're getting from this? And if I was being conservative, judicious with my highlighting, not highlighting too much, what would I highlight? So I have this little timer up here on the screen. I'm going to turn my camera off just so I'm not distracting and like staring at you guys while you're reading the screen. So I'm going to give you 90 seconds to read these three paragraphs, and we will talk on the other side. Okay, I'm going to give you guys 10 more seconds. Just finish up. Okay, awesome. So, scale of 0 to 10, how did we feel about this? 0, it was awful. 10, I loved it. It was so easy. Where do we lie on this passage? Saying 8, 7, 7. Yeah, I honestly didn't hate this one too much. I like thought it didn't have too much crazy language, pretty straightforward. So we're gonna start with this first paragraph. What do you guys think are important things that we should highlight? So I'm saying the time period. So maybe the time period, definitely in the second paragraph, yeah, we were going to talk about kind of all these dates so we can get kind of a sense of where Kai Lun was most prominent, but kind of starting up at the top. Yeah, so this name Kai Lun is appears like all throughout these first three paragraphs. So I definitely think it's important to highlight. We don't need to highlight it every time, but I think it's important to know what we are talking about. And Kaya is saying here in the chat, we are talking all about paper. So I think it's important just from the get-go to know that we are talking about the invention of paper and specifically who it's given, who we gave credit to. Um, and then I love what you're saying here in the chat here about the standardization of paper making. So we're not just talking about the fact that paper was like originally invented because they say like these Egyptians were doing it 3,000 years before. It had been done before, but they improved and standardized paper making. Obviously, we know maybe a little less in today's day and age. I feel like I'm writing on a tablet. I feel like we are much more electronic, but for thousands and thousands of years, paper has been unbelievably important, and it's obviously still very important. So this invention is clearly something that is super impactful. Again, saying it's not about the creation of it, but it's about the standardization of it. So then we go into this second paragraph. And what Catherine was saying was talking about the time periods. And I like this. I don't know if I would necessarily highlight all of them, but I do think it's important to kind of look at the progression. So, Kylon started at this lower level, we can presume, because he was not emperor yet. But I think we can kind of see how he comes into this place of considerable influence. So we looked kind of in this last sentence, and it talks about how he goes to a position of influence in the court. So what we can see is throughout these years, 75 AD, 89 AD, 97 AD, all the way to 105 AD, as we progress through time, he's becoming more influential, and that culminates in him completing his paper technique. So I like this emphasis on time. I don't think dates are always important to highlight, but I think here it really shows us how, as he kind of progressed through the government and became more powerful, that coincided nicely with this standardization of paper. So now this last paragraph switched to kind of a different idea. What did you guys pull out from here? Who are we talking about? What did they believe? No wrong answers. Yeah. Vienna historian Will Durant. I love this. Yeah, I think this name is definitely important to highlight because this whole paragraph is about what he believes. I mean, can anyone tell me like what he believes? Like what is this paragraph really telling us about? Yeah, we're still talking about Kailan. And yeah, specifically, yeah, I love this maple. Will Durant is explaining how the paper is made. So honestly, I think like perfected a recipe, like that kind of sums it up. Like again, you obviously for cars do not need to know how paper is made, but we get into some really granular details. So I like what we kind of have laid out here. We're talking about this invention, or at least this as standardization improvement in paper making, and specifically kind of the how the usual story. And I'm going to go back and actually highlight that because I think that's some interesting language. The usual story gives credit to Kailan, who was an official in China. And again, talking about how as he rose to power, he was influential in making this paper technique. And then in this very end, we talk about a historian who specifically is talking about his recipe. So really, again, focused on this one figure and his role in paper making. And so now we are going to go to some slightly different ideas in our last two paragraphs. Once again, I'm going to give you guys 90 seconds. Um, and then we will talk about our highlights here, our main ideas from these paragraphs, and then some main ideas from the passage as a whole. Okay, great. So last two paragraphs here, switching to some different ideas. This fourth paragraph here, what are we talking about? Any key highlights, main idea points to pull out? Oh yeah, so I love this. So focusing in on a couple great ideas here. So specifically talking about this other historian, Thomas Carter, and how he says that Chiron was not the one who did this. It was either underlying or something rediscovered. So again, um if we look at the very first part of this paragraph, it's telling us that this new technique was relatively simple, right? It was not something that required a great deal of thought. It was rather just something that like anyone could have rediscovered. So this historian is questioning this story that everyone believes. Again, if we flip back one slide, the usual story is that Chiron was the one who invented and modernized paper, but what the historian Thomas Carter is challenging here is saying that some subordinates were actually the ones and that Chiron takes the credit for it. So again, suggesting that maybe the story that a lot of people have believed for so long isn't true. What about this last paragraph? Again, we are expanding on these ideas of Thomas Carter. What do we get from here? Ooh, I love this, Maple. Yeah, we're getting a lot of evidence behind Carter's view. Yeah, seeing that in second century BC, there was very similar paper, another date that I thought to highlight. And it was very nearly similar to Kylan's method. So that archaeological evidence is going to be one thing. And then Carter talks about all these people. Like there are so many people that worked under Kylan, and so the odds that he did it are very slim. So I just kind of highlighted odds seem slim. I'm a little bit more of a minimalist highlighter. I'm not saying this is like the max number of highlights you can do, just to give you a sense of how I would do it. But really, what I want to point out here is again, yeah, we have a lot of evidence. So if I was kind of passage mapping it here, in this upper paragraph, we have this new idea. This is Carter. And then down here, we have all the Carter evidence. And when you can look at a car's passage and understand the key arguments and the key evidence, that's really going to be the ticket. It can be really, really hard when you get lost in like, okay, what are they even saying? Like, who's saying what? Sometimes you will have multiple arguments. Sometimes you will just have the authors. But really, really important to try to figure out, okay, what is my argument and what is my evidence? And now, something I think that can be really helpful when we are finishing up a passage is to think about our main idea and the way that I like to think about this, I lost my pen, is there's something called a main idea ingredient list. Now, I don't think we have a straight up main idea question today, but you will have a lot of them on your actual test day. And now if you can come up with a couple of buzzwords that comprise your main idea ingredient list, those can be helpful to cross-check when you're actually going through a main idea style question. So I'm going to ask you guys, what would fit in our main idea ingredient list here? Can be anything that you think is relevant, any relevant terms from the passage. Since in a little bit of hesitancy. So I can add a couple. Oh, love this. Okay, yeah, Kylun. Yeah, Maple, I love that. Also, just a great summary. Kylun was not most likely not the one who invented paper. So yeah, paper making and credit of discovery. I think this is a great list. And you guys summed it up extremely well. So these are the ideas that you want to keep in mind while you're answering your questions. Again, not every question is a main idea question, but so many of our questions are going to be rooted in the core concepts of our main idea. And sorry, my handwriting got a little bit crazy down there. So we are going to go over to a couple of questions. And quickly, before we start approaching this, I want to talk about how we are going to handle our poll here, just because we don't have polls today. So what we are going to do is we are going to walk through our SIP strategy. We are going to simplify, identify, and predict. Um, After we are done with that, I'm going to give you guys a minute to look at the question. Encouraging you, please, please, please don't put anything in the chat. And then once the minute is up, I will count down 3, 2, 1, and you guys will put the letter that you think it is. And this is just gonna be the best way to make sure you guys are all participating and I can get a sense of how you guys are doing, and tailor kind of our discussion around that because we don't have a ton of time. So based on the passage, the level of technical skill necessary to develop the papermaking techniques discussed was. So thinking about the crucial elements of this question stem, we know we need to look at technical skill, and it's all about paper making techniques. Again, this is very relevant to our passage, but what paragraph did we specifically talk about, like the skill of making paper? Does anyone remember? Yeah, second slide, love it. So if we go back to our second slide, specifically in our fourth paragraph, and yes, oh my gosh, you guys are taking my job away from me. Yes, so it takes a low skill level, just experimentation. So in our fourth paragraph, we were able to identify that, which is incredible. So P4 and low skill level. So using that, I'm going to give you guys probably 45 seconds for this one. Again, I'm going to turn my camera off. And don't put anything in the chat until we are done, until I count down 3, 2, 1. So 45 seconds, go ahead and go. Okay, so I'm going to count down and I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1, and then put your answer in the chat. So go ahead and get it ready. And then I'm going to count down. So 3, 2, and 1. Put it in the chat. Yeah, awesome work, you guys. Okay, so we have not even a majority, we have a unanimously said answer choice A, and that is going to be our correct answer here. So great work, you guys. Answer choice A. And as you guys can see, this aligns extremely well with our predictions. So um, answer choice A, low enough that the paper could have been invented by any number of craftsmen. It wasn't so dramatic to say that an uneducated peasant could have development. That's maybe a little bit too of an extreme answer choice. It did not require a remarkably high level of skill. This is opposite. And it about the same as would have been needed to be accepted as a journeyman under Kylan's service is also going to be incorrect. Because it is again not exactly going to be this kind of low enough that it could have been by any number of craftsmen. So close, but not quite. I'll put close, but not quite. So excellent work with that question. Great job identifying the detail. And I think this really underscores the importance of that identify step. So going to move on to our next question. Based on the passage, it is most likely true that Durant and Carter would disagree about which of the following. So, talking about disagreement of our two historians. So, I know you guys don't have a copy of the passage, so I will help you with that identify step. So we talk about Durant in paragraph 3, and then we talk about Carter in paragraph 4 and paragraph 5. And so if we're going to talk first about Durant, do you guys remember what Durant's whole thing was? Like, what did he say? And I know you guys are getting a little peek at the answer choices, so I'm going to hide them really quick. What was Durant talking about? If you guys remember, this was that third paragraph, the bottom of the first slide. Yeah, you got it, Maple. So Durant was all about how Kylon made the paper. And now what was Carter thinking? Like what was Carter's main point? Yeah, exactly. Kylon might not have made the paper. So I want you guys to use those two predictions. Again, I'm going to give you guys about 45 seconds to a minute, and then we will come back and discuss. Okay, everyone get your answer choices ready and drop them in the chat in 3, 2, and 1. Love it. Great participation. And again, unanimously for answer choice C, whether Kylon was the one to perfect this paper. For the sake of time, since we all got it, we are going to move to probably what will be our last question here. I think I'm going to skip this next one and we will do this question here. I'm not going to give you guys any setup. You guys are doing so well, but what I encourage you to do is to walk through that SIP strategy. I'm going to give you guys a little bit over a minute, and then after the minute, we will talk through the SIP strategy. So, work through SIP strategy. I'm going to give you guys about a minute, minute and a half. Okay, get your answer. Oh, were you guys not able to see the answer choices that whole time? That is completely my bad. I'm gonna give you guys a little bit more time to read it. I'm so sorry about that. Okay, everyone, get your answer choices ready. And we are going to have drop them in the chat in three, two, and one. Go ahead and drop them. Ooh, okay. So seeing a little bit of conflict between answer choice D and answer choice B. So gonna go ahead again for the sake of time, eliminate answer choice A and C. Those are a little bit not in the scope of kind of what Carter's ideas were. But we know here we are focused on what Carter believed. And we talked about two questions ago, or last question, sorry, that Carter was all about kind of talking about how Kylun didn't actually get the credit, should not get the credit for the paper. So Kylun did not invent. And so if we actually go back to this paragraph and we look at specifically what was said, I'll flip back to paragraph 3. He specifically says that Kylun, one of the people that worked for him were more likely to have made it. So it says historian Thomas Carter posits that one of Kylun's subordinates of a lower craftsman class is much more likely to have developed the technique, for which Kylun takes credit for. So is there anywhere in this paragraph that gives you kind of the indication that you think the author thinks that Kylun should get any credit? Do you think he is suggesting that at all? Yeah, saying a no. And I really agree with that. So if we look at the differences between answer choice B and answer choice D, answer choice D is talking about how it should be shared. And I agree. I think the Carter says that you should give credit to whom credit is due, but specifically, they're talking about how it could be attributed to one of the people that work for them. If the passage had said, it can be attributed to all the people that work for them or a group of them made it, then D is going to align a little bit more. But our correct answer here is actually going to be answer choice B, um, because it doesn't contradict information we don't know. We don't have the information to know how many people. We would need to know for this answer choice, we would need to know that multiple people were involved. And we don't quite get that information. And again, we found this in paragraph 4, paragraph 5. No credit to Kai Lan. So, no, we had to breeze through that a little bit quicker. We are running a little bit low on time, but 6 is in the chat. Do you guys understand why B is the correct answer choice? You can drop a 9 if you do not understand. Okay, awesome. So now, really quickly, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Blueprint. And so why Blueprint? Again, I love working for Blueprint. I think it's a great company. And Blueprint has a lot of different services. So we have instructors who scored super, super well in the MCAT, a lot of modules, a very adaptable study plan. So it's AI generated based on how many modules you have and what your weaknesses are, which is really helpful. We have live online review sessions 5 days a week, MCAT books, and access to the AAMC online resources, which are essential. This is now mobile friendly. We have a super interactive and amazing Q bank with over 4,000 questions and really, really great analytics. Something that like the AAMC truly doesn't offer. Our practice exams are great. A lot of people see very, very accurate scores when it comes to going from their blueprint test to their AAMC and then to their actual test day. So we are constantly updating them. Our education development team is fantastic. And again, most students score within 1 to 2 points of our tests. So it's a very, very realistic testing environment. Um, we have a ton of different packages. You can do a tutoring package with top scoring tutors one-on-one. We have live online courses with live online office hours. I'm a live online teacher. I love it. It's 16 classes. You learn like such valuable strategy. We barely scratched the surface of MCAT strategy. Then you can also just get test bundles. So maybe you aren't interested in a live online class or tutor, but if you want some more practice tests, it's great. We do have blueprint flashcards that are tailored to our information. They utilize spaced repetition just like Anki does, which is great, but they're like super pretty, they're very customizable. Again, amazing analytics, and it helps keep you motivated. And it is mobile ready. So just like Anki, you can use it on the go. And then this is the website if you want to look at it, mcatflashcards.com. And then if you purchase our flashcards, you get a free MCAT Pass practice bundle, which comes with all these amazing things on the side. I know I absolutely flew through that, but we will give you guys contact information, and I'm gonna go ahead and drop my email in the chat if anything comes up after class. But I just want to give a couple minutes. I know we started a few minutes late, and I've been talking so much. So very quickly, do you guys have any questions? And feel free to just drop them in the chat. About med school, the MCAT, truly anything you can think to ask. And again, you can always shoot me an email if you are like, this girl talked at me for so long and my brain's dead. And so all of the MCAT is actually going to be online. So it is 4 sections: biochem, chem phys, cars, and psych soc. All of those are going to be online, roughly all about 90 minutes, a little bit of variance. But all going to be on an online testing format, and you take it at a testing center like a Prometric. So similar to I guess ICT, ACT kind of take it at high schools, but you take it at a testing center. So I studied a little bit during the semester, and then I had like 6 weeks of very, very dedicated studying. So a very accelerated timeline. Advice in making a study plan, like if you're doing it, I completely self-studied. So I just looked one up on the internet and kind of modified based on the time I had. Just a general piece of advice is there's so much information out there, which can be great. Utilize the information that is available to you on the internet for free. Always great stuff. So I would just look one up. I think that's the best place to get started, and then kind of tailor it, and you'll get a sense as you start of what's working and what's not. Yeah, something I wish I knew before studying for the MCAT. The MCAT is really a strategy test. There's a lot of content on it, but if you can master the strategy of the MCAT, you will score unbelievably. And the content will come, especially if you are like engaging with your college courses. So really, I wish I'd paid more attention to the strategy. It is something that like the best test takers are phenomenal at strategy. And again, so many places to learn that. Again, I think Blueprint does a great job of teaching strategy. It can be read about strategy, practice strategy, learn to be a little bit more efficient. But that is really to me like the money of taking the MCAT. It's so crucial. And so with that, I don't think we have any more questions. I'm going to turn it over. I think you guys have a couple of announcements. But thank you guys so much for having me. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions. But thank you guys so much.
Yes, so we have a bunch of thank yous and like rounds of applause for Catherine. That was so like I'm not going to be taking the MCAT at all, but like it was so very helpful, just the strategies that she shared. So thank you.
Thank you
Just
guys so much.
a couple of things before we let you guys go, or if you guys wanted to stay a little bit to ask some more questions. We're going to be putting in the chat. Um, or you can scan this QR code. This is our workshop eval. So if you guys could complete that, that would be so great. This is just to help us, if you want us to have more workshops like this, or if you guys have any feedback or anything, please go ahead and let us know through this eval. That would be very helpful. Give you guys a little bit of time for that. And then we do have some more workshops coming up. So this was the cars workshop, and we do have a mock MCAT that is this Saturday. Um, if you guys haven't already signed up for that, please go ahead and let us know. We might be able to squeeze you guys in. And we also, since you guys are here, you guys are interested in medical school. If you're interested in staying in Hawaii, we do have JABSOM admissions who are going to come and chat with us and answer any questions next week, Tuesday, during the same time. And then we also finally finalized our dates and our times for the Basic Life Support Certification Workshop. So if you wanted to get your certification for free, go ahead and sign up for this one as well. But definitely stay up to date with all of our opportunities, our workshops, any job opportunities, research, or volunteering. All of that goes through our Instagram, through our email newsletter. But that is it. So thank you guys so much for coming in and getting some cars practice. We hope that it was really helpful, and Catherine was a really great instructor. And so if you guys have any questions about the MCAT or advising questions, please feel free to stay. Kayla and I will stay on. I think Catherine had to head out, but yeah, let us know if you have anything that you guys are curious about or have questions for. But other than that, I know we ended a little bit early, but you guys are free to go if not. So thank you.